in photographers. And I also, Amanda just mentioned that it's perhaps one of the most common issues that artists bring up when she works with them. And that lack of confidence, even though it's more of a soft skill, it's, you know, it's not a technical business skill. It's not like a step-by-step process, as Amanda said, on building a website, can have a surprising impact on both our sense of well-being, but also our businesses. So I might throw over to Amanda, who's going to run us through the session, and let her introduce herself a little bit more fully.
Terrific. Thank you, Dylan. And thank you everyone for coming along to the session. Imposter syndrome is just one of the types of sort of mindset issues that can derail careers. And I want to take you through that today, because when you get past things like that, it makes it so much easier for you to have success. Now, we've got a little bit of background noise, Dylan, so we might need to just, if people can mute, that would be great. And I'm going to take you through some slides, and I'm just going to share my screen and put this into present mode, and I'm just going to check. Can I get a thumbs up from somebody, or chat? Can you see my screen?
If you can't see Amanda, just click on view in the top right and change it to side-by-side speaker. So then you'll see both the screen and Amanda.
Okay, so people can see my screen? I got a yes from anyone? Yep, thank you. Sometimes it goes into crazy places. Oh, there we go. We've got a chat confirmation. Thank you very much. Righto, so conquering the imposter syndrome, and of course this is in context of valuing yourself and your art. Now I'm going to be really clear when I talk about art and artists. I don't differentiate between mediums, and I don't differentiate in terms of how you deliver your creative practice, whether it's more commercially focused, whether you're a photographer, whether you're a painter, whether you exhibit in galleries or you work online. All of that is really quite irrelevant for the purposes of this, because this is about imposter syndrome for you as a creative professional. So if I do use the term art or artist, and that's not something that you call yourself or call your practice, please just bear with me, because I do actually mean everyone that is here today. Okay, and then I'm going to have my fun navigation. So I have issues with my toolbar coming up at the bottom. I had this last time too. Okay, so in today's session, the fact is that imposter syndrome is rife. It's estimated that over 70% of people will have imposter syndrome at some time in their life. Now, that might be an ongoing issue, or it could be very short term, but the fact that it touches such a large proportion of people makes it a really important topic to talk about. Now, in this session, I'm going to share with you information on what imposter syndrome actually is, how it may be impacting you. I'm going to share some techniques to help you reduce the incidence of imposter syndrome in your life, and a quick technique to get you out of an imposter syndrome attack if you find yourself in the middle of one. So we're going to look to better understand it, to be able to reduce its impact, and to be able to get out of it when you're facing it. And I'm going to start with just this little quote from Margaret Mead, which is, "You are unique, just like everyone else." All of us make the art that we make. She's actually a social anthropologist, but I love the quote, because you are unique. And one of the things that we'll touch on in this session is comparisons, and making comparison of yourself against others, and how that can be more of an issue. And I just want to say up front, you make the work that you make, that you are called to make, because you are the only person who can make your work. Yes. And there's something really valuable to remember about that with that confidence. Always love a little bombing in from a kid or a pet. Thank you. But first, let me introduce myself. I know a few of you were on the last session that I did, courtesy of Dylan. And so this is just a quick repeat, but some of you haven't met me before. My name is Amanda Van Gils. I'm an artist, a painter specifically, and I've been painting for a good long while. And when I say a good long while, I went to art school in a decade that begins with the number 8. So a long time ago. I'm an artist, but I'm also a business owner, and I'm also a coach, and I've been coaching for quite some time. I've had successful online businesses, both products and services, and multiple exhibitions in a variety of venues over the last 20 years in particular. Commercial galleries, art prizes, I've curated exhibitions, I've worked with lots of artists through online communities and coaching through the Artist Business Lounge, which is the business that I now run alongside my art practice. Now, the reason that imposter syndrome, like I feel so compelled to talk about this, is I graduated from my undergrad in 1989, just aged myself, and I spent a couple of years really trying hard to be an artist instead of an art student. And I was so derailed by imposter syndrome that after a couple more years of trying, I actually gave up all thoughts of being an artist for a few years. And that was really impactful to me, to my sense of identity of who I was, and it took a long time to come back to it. And imposter syndrome was at the core. So I understand firsthand the impact that imposter syndrome can have and how totally useless it is to engage with imposter syndrome. So these are just a few pictures, me in my studio, previous work catalogue, some of the communities catalogue that I've curated. So just a little snapshot of me. I'm originally from Melbourne, but I'm based in Brisbane these days. So that's probably enough about me. If you want to find out more, amandavangils.com or theartistbusinesslounge.com, you will find information about me if you like. But hopefully that gives you enough of a sense that you're happy to stay and hear my take on imposter syndrome. So we're going to start with, what actually is it? Now, it was first described in 1978, so it's been around for a while, and it's really where individuals experience chronic self-doubt and a sense of intellectual fraudulence that overrides any feelings of success or external proof of their competence. Now, I'm going to explain that a little bit more as we work through. But in other words, these are people who feel that they are less competent than they truly are, and they fear that they're going to be found out and found wanting, that people are going to work out that they don't know as much as they really do. Now, it isn't a mental illness, and it's not even really a syndrome. It was originally called imposter phenomenon, but what it is a limiting beliefs mindset. Now, the sorts of words and phrases that get used include things like, I don't belong here, anybody could have done it, I'm just fooling around trying to do this, I'm a total fraud, everyone's going to find out, you know, what am I doing? Those kinds of littling of yourself. And it actually affects anybody. It cuts across all classes, all jobs, all social status, but we see it the most in high achieving individuals, people who are ambitious and people who have really quite high standards tend to, and they can't internalize their accomplishments, however successful they are in their field. So often it's very intelligent and very high achieving individuals that are subject to this. A lot of people will experience it like in the first few weeks of a new job, and that's kind of normal, and it's not really imposter syndrome, it's just these feelings are sort of right. But when it lasts, then it can be very debilitating. So if you're wondering, that sounds a little bit familiar, here's a few questions, and I just want you to take a moment, and I wonder if any of this sounds like you. Now, if you have imposter syndrome, you don't need to tick every one of these boxes. But if you're reading these statements and thinking, yep, and you've got a few of them, you go, yeah, that sort of sounds like me, there is a good chance that you may be suffering from imposter syndrome. So I'll just give you a moment to read those. Okay, so how are you thinking? I'm getting, Nancy, 100% me. Does anyone else relate to any of those? Absolutely. Okay, so we've got a couple of people owning up. Yep, sure do. See, look, I owned up to the fact that I've suffered from it for years, unfortunately. Yeah, well, Lauren, don't worry. I'm going to share with you some tips about how you can move past it. Okay, so there's some people who are saying, yep, I definitely feel like that. And maybe there's some others who aren't saying it, but that's okay because you don't have to say it and declare it. But thank you for engaging. So let's, that discounting your achievements, there are so many things that happen with imposter syndrome. And there we go. So what causes imposter syndrome? Well, actually, there's a few different things that cause it, and it can come from all sorts of things. Your personality versus your experience, overly critical adults, particularly in formative years, so early childhood, being told you can't do things and so on, or at art school being told that you can't do things, or wherever you went. A lack of recognisable role models can play into it. I don't look like someone who does this, therefore who am I to think I could do this? Low parental expectations, or conversely, really high parental expectations can also have an impact. A lack of care and attention in childhood, and even things like your career's happening so fast you feel like you're out of control of it. So it can actually come from all sorts of things, but it's what we take from these experiences and how we then transform them into our beliefs that I'm going to touch on a little further down, which really is what causes it. Now, why do we care about it? Well, the first thing is it actually feels not great. Like, that's just as simple as it is. It does not feel great to have imposter syndrome, to have that feeling of I'm going to be found out. I remember the very, very first time I heard it, it was an incredibly successful actor from the 50s and 60s who had this amazing career. And I saw him being quoted as saying, I've been waiting forever for them to find out I'm a fraud. And it was like, it can strike anyone. So what does it matter for your creative career? It does things like it limits your power within your career. It makes you play small. You're less inclined to reach out for opportunities because you just expect they won't come through. For creative people of all sorts, requires them putting themselves out there. Proposals, marketing, applications, and it can cause procrastination and inaction because, again, you're fearful that you're not good enough. It makes you miss out on career and financial opportunities. Like, if you don't follow up on potential interest, from potential clients, potential galleries, collaborators, whatever, because you feel like you're not ready or not worthy, or you keep your prices low, you may neglect to be visible and neglect to put yourself forward and have ineffective marketing. And this is an interesting one, I find, unintentionally making it difficult for people to buy your work. Now, if you currently have work available and you have a website to make work available, after this session, go and have a look at your website and see how easy it is to buy your work. Now, some people, it's incredibly difficult to see that, and they don't even realise that that's what they've done. So this is where you would see that. It also limits your creative expansion. Now, a perfectionist, which is one of the 5 types that I'm going to cover off, can't move on to the next thing until this thing is 100% perfect. So they stay stuck. And there are other types, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit later, but it does limit your ability to your creative expansion. And also joy. When you feel stuck, your art can stay stuck too, and you spend too much time worrying, you can't get into that real creative flow, that joyful flow where, the ideas just ping off each other and the work resolves because you're too much stuck inside your head. These are the sorts of things, and it's a non-exhaustive list, but these are the sorts of things that can happen when you have imposter syndrome or other impacting limiting beliefs. Does any of that feel familiar for anybody? Just a quick thumbs up or a yes. Just want to make sure that I'm on the right track for you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, so there's yes, an exclamation mark. Yeah, procrastination's an interesting one. And procrastination is so interesting. I could do an entire session on procrastination, but we won't do that today. Thank you for that. Let me get to the next one. Righto, so let's get into imposter syndrome, 5 different types. So research has identified these types: the perfectionist, the superhero, the natural genius, the soloist, and the expert. Now, you can actually have a combination of any of these, but they do show up, their imposter syndrome shows up in slightly different ways. Now, I already confessed that perfectionism is my issue that I've worked on for a long time. Let me just share with you this screen. And so here is just a 1-line indicator. So the expert, you expect to know everything and you just feel ashamed when you don't. The soloist believes that you must accomplish your work alone and you don't take credit if there's assistance provided. The natural genius is someone who just believes that everything should come easily. Otherwise, it's not naturally talent. You know, if you have to work really hard to acquire a skill, you're not a natural. The superhero is someone who feels that they should be able to excel at every role they take on in their life, personal and professional, and just excel at every single thing. And the perfectionist sets such impossibly high standards for themselves and they beat themselves up when they don't reach them. And because they're impossibly high standards, they're never going to reach them. Ergo, they beat themselves up a fair amount. So there's 5 different types. On those quick summaries, can anyone relate to any of those? Are there any that sort of strike you on that sentence? Yep, expert. Now, I'm tipping that there's going to be, are there a lot of photographers here in the group? Yep. Yep. How does that expert feel for you? When I was going through reading the description of experts and I get into it more, I thought, oh, I can imagine being a photographer and this being a really big deal because of that technical expertise, how important it is. But perfectionism, so we've got perfectionism, we've got people responding to expert, superhero, perfectionist. Yeah. So there's clearly a few. The natural genius. Now, no one's sort of resonating with that just yet, but let me take you into them a little bit more. Always feel like I'm a beginner because there's always people way better. I get that. I totally get that. But you know what? There's always people who are older. There's always people who are taller. There's always people who are thinner. There's always, there's always people who are something else. And this is why comparison is the thief of joy. And we need to stop comparing ourselves to others. There's a whole lot I'll say on that as we go through. When you're holding yourself, and I might actually use that statement right now, when you compare yourself to others, you compare what you see on the outside. It's like looking at someone's social media feed. You know, you see that curated life. All you see is the achievement. When you're thinking about yourself, you see not just the achievement, you see the struggles, the failures, the things you got wrong, the worries, the learning experience, everything you've got through. So you're judging yourself in this entirely more complex way than you're seeing somebody else. And so for that reason, you are never comparing yourself fairly when you compare yourself with another, because all you get to see of them really is their shiny light. You don't know what nightmares they have at nighttime. You don't know what difficulties they have outside of that. So that's one of the reasons, and only one, why comparing yourself to others who've gone further and done more is such an unhelpful thing for you. And one of the things about limiting beliefs and mindset is to always think, how is this thought serving me? Because if it's serving you and it's helping you to go further, do better, learn more, then that's useful, potentially. But if it's a judgment, then it's not terribly helpful. So thank you for bringing that up about that comparison, about feeling like you're always a beginner. If you feel like you're always a beginner, I'm suspecting that expert might work for you in terms of what you think here. Now, so much fun navigating this slide. Here we go. So I'm going to take each type just a little bit. So experts, to expand on that, they have to learn everything there is to know about a topic before considering their work a success. And they're often very highly skilled, but underrate their expertise and are never satisfied with their level of understanding. So experts are people who can spend so much time down the rabbit hole of learning and evolving techniques that they might actually sacrifice the time of making the work. And it was that highly skilled technical thing that made me think of photographers, and I don't know if I'm off the beam there. So if you resonate with an expert, here are a couple of things, and excuse this typo. Identify what is unique about you. Really understand your strengths from within, not as compared against others. Stand in who are you and really get a better sense of your own natural strengths just in relation to yourself. And remember the first time you did something, because everything you're confident doing now, you were once a beginner at. So allow yourself to adopt a beginner's mindset. You don't have to be an expert at everything. But make best use of your expert tendencies. So use your knowledge to assist and mentor others. No. Use your knowledge to assist and mentor others so that you can use that inner expert and remind yourself of the learning curve through sharing with other people. So anyone who said they were an expert, does that sound helpful? Looking for clues in chat. Yeah, thank you. Yep, great, thank you. Okay, now the natural genius is the next one. You're not seeing me Dylan, you're not seeing me keep moving my screen around, are you?
No, the share screen is stable.
Beautiful. Yeah, just wanted to make sure because I'm moving things around here. So the natural genius is someone who actually has a really good natural facility for things. Quite often they will actually learn things and be very adept at picking up new skills. The natural genius tends to believe that competent people can handle anything with little difficulty. And while they may be adept at picking up new skills with little no effort, they actually expect that to be normal. And what that means that if something doesn't come easily to them, or they fail on the first try, they might feel ashamed and embarrassed. So the natural geniuses are the ones that tend to stick to their lane and give up on stuff. So a good way for the natural genius to cope with that tendency is to engage in continual learning and development. So there's long-term growth, but also to plan quick wins, to set longer-term aspirational goals, like big goals, but break them down into lots of tiny milestones that can be achieved along the way, so that you can keep feeling that you've picked up something new, It's a way to reward yourself. And also to experiment and play and actually allow yourself to embrace mistakes. So make a part of your routine, a part of your life, not being a genius or an expert, just doing something because you enjoy it and no other reason. The soloist, they tend to be individualistic and prefer to work alone. They believe that they should be able to handle everything on their own. And if they can't achieve success independently, they consider themselves unworthy. So their self-worth tends to come from productivity. And they see asking for help as a sign of weakness. So a good way for them to flip that is to consider offering to teach or mentor others, making a list of people you've learned from so that you can remind yourself that it's not all just down to you, and purposely seek out people with different but complementary skills and experiences to collaborate with, do some kind of collaboration. And the other thing that's helpful for soloists, because if you tend to work alone and you tend to be alone, you'll often tend to think that the way you feel is something alone too, that this is unique to you. But talking about your experiences with people you trust, you'll start to see that this is actually far more common and it's not just about you. The next one is the superhero, and these are the people who link their competence to their ability to succeed in everything. They tend to push themselves to the limit. They expend lots of energy. So people with lots of burnout experience, where they're really trying to do everything, that this is a common type of imposter syndrome for them. They always think that they should be able to do more and that it should be easier, and any failure is just proof that they're not good enough. And so my first tip is just cut yourself a break. Remember, you're human. You're not a robot. You're a human. Seek out an experienced mentor or business buddy to share experiences and learn from. One of the things that's really beneficial here is that you get to understand their experiences and how they're operating to give you a bit more of a benchmark about your own level of expectation. You also need to remind yourself that any constructive criticism, helpful feedback, is not personal and not a personal attack. That's something that comes up for this type. And embrace any failures or mistakes as learning opportunities. Okay, I missed that out, but what did I learn from it and what could I do differently, rather than sitting in judgment about what that means about you as a person. And the last one of these 5 is the perfectionist. Now, these perfectionists focus on how they do things and demanding they deliver the highest standards in every respect, which are inherently unachievable. So there's lots of self-criticism. If you've got a really loud inner voice, that's probably a bit of perfectionism at play. They just simply can't do things unless it's perfect. Now, perfectionism, as we all know intellectually, is not even possible. There is no such thing as perfect. So for a perfectionist to manage through this type is around tracking your accomplishments and giving you credit for what you have done. And yes, you can be multiple, absolutely. And lots of people do have a bit of this and a bit of that. So keep an eye on what you have done and push yourself to act before you are ready. There's an expression that I used to hear a lot, which was better done than perfect. As a perfectionist with high standards, I actually found that really difficult because a lot of people were saying, oh, better done, and they were using it to excuse really low caliber work. And that's not the way to get around being a perfectionist. So I like this mantra that I've heard, which is version done is better than version none. Because perfectionism tends to keep people stuck and procrastinating because they can't be good enough. So version done is better than version none. But make best use of your high standards. For me, what I've changed that to is I aspire to excellence, not perfection. So strive for excellence, which is expansive, not perfection, which cuts things down. So that's 5 different types. Do you want to stop for just a moment and check in on how people are feeling about that? I can stop the pause share screen if we like.
Yeah, do you want to go back to the gallery view, Amanda?
Yes, I will. By which you mean just stop share, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I should have mentioned is while we're recording this, it's not going to go up like a traditional session. Like we will send out a recording if you want to watch it, but it won't go publicly on our YouTube. Just sort of reviewing where we got to so far, would anyone be willing to talk a bit about their own experience or their own business and whether some of the stuff that Amanda's been talking about has resonated?
And if people are just comfortable in the chat instead, that's completely okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to share, Dylan.
Thanks, Garth.
What I come across, like I have a background in IT, so I'm talking about being the expert. Now, the problem I come up against is that, yes, I've achieved great things with IT systems and stuff like that, but then when I hit a problem that I don't know how to fix, that's when I get that imposter syndrome and balk at thinking I don't know anything.
Yeah, and this is something that happens with that imposter syndrome when you think that you have to know everything, and if you don't know something, it negates what you do know. And so keeping focused on what you do know, that you've had those achievements, and also giving yourself that out about you don't have to know everything. All you have to know is what's a path to get to solve this. So, for example, if I was talking with someone just yesterday about something similar, and she was judging herself about the fact that she didn't know how to use a particular technique. But it wasn't about knowing the technique. It's, I want this outcome. How do I find that? So what she did instead was, who do I go to that can help me do that? Because you're not trying to know everything. You're just trying to get things solved. So allowing yourself to ask for others, to ask for advice, to focus on the end. What's the outcome and what do I need to get there? So some problem solving rather than, I don't know this, I better not do everything. So it's all about judgment. You don't have to be an expert on everything.
But that then goes against my perfectionism and saying it has to be right.
Well, you want to decide whether I'm more comfortable sitting here not knowing and feeling perfectionistic, or whether I'm prepared to test the waters a bit. What that might mean though is that you're quite particular about who you ask for help and their level and standard.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
So that they meet your standard.
Yep.
Can I just jump in there? A really good example, Garth, is we've got a client who is absolutely at the very upper end of the market. Like I'm talking $30,000 for a portrait shoot. She's never opened Photoshop, never opened Lightroom, and is completely comfortable with that fact. Because I remember talking to her maybe almost 5 years ago now, and her attitude to that is she's got a role within her business, but it doesn't have to be all roles. And, photography is such a technically complex subject that sometimes having that confidence to just push off a task that you're not comfortable with or you don't feel on top of can just push your business forward so much.
Yeah, and that's right, Dylan. As you know from our interactions, I'm a bit funny about photos and editing them and stuff like that, and trying to get them right. It is a funny thing, but you're right. Yeah, reaching out to, but trying to find the people to reach out to, as Amanda said, that's probably the bit I struggle with.
Yeah, I think that many people, there's a transition for people. And this is whether they suffer from imposter syndrome or not, but anyone that's trying to run any kind of business, be it creative or not, there's this transition time from I have to do everything myself to allowing yourself to delegate out, outsource, and not be the expert in everything, but hiring in experts, because the reality is you only have a certain amount of time available to you, and you have to make choices about where you're going to spend that time. Are you going to spend that time learning something else just because you don't know it, or are you going to spend that time making your work while someone else takes care of that for you?
Yeah, then you come up against the perfectionist trying to pick the right people to do the work for you.
It's all about testing.
Yes.
Briefing well and testing. Thank you. So hopefully...
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Garth. We've had a few other comments, and there's been a little bit about causing procrastination. If I can't get it perfect, then I just loop there for too long and struggle to make a definite decision and think then expert comparing, etc. So yes, that's one of the issues with imposter syndrome of all different types, is that procrastination that it can cause. I actually have another slide that I want to get to in a moment, which I'll expand on this a bit more. Who am I to think I can charge my prices for what I do? Gosh, I can't tell you, Annie, how often I hear that from other people. That is a money mindset block, self-worth block, and pushing through the barrier. There are some definite techniques to work through that. One of the things that's really helpful with imposter syndrome is to reframe language. So what's that thought? You know, why can't you charge those prices? What's the actual worry that's going on there? And so a different question might be, well, why can't you charge those prices? And what's the answer to that? And are those stories real? Do you actually know that for a fact? So sometimes it's about actually reframing and stepping out of the feeling and of what's in your head and getting a little bit more factual about it. But we can, I do a whole piece on money mindset in my programs, so I understand that entirely. But the thing is, we get so fixated on prices. The price isn't the issue. The price is about being confident that you have value to offer, and how do we create that? Family and friends telling you that you cost too much, it plays with your work. Yeah, and who are those family and friends? Like, where are they coming from? Are they the ones that are paying your mortgage? Probably not. So these are some of the beliefs and where they come in. I want to just talk about that in a moment. There's a lot here, so can I just hop back into a couple of slides, because I think they're going to help some of the comments that have come up about the loop. See what I want to be and inspired by that, and then feel terrible about my own work because I'm not there, then feel I shouldn't be doing it yet at all because I'm not where I want to be, even though I have a successful business. You've got to appreciate where you are right now and the part on the journey. So that sounds very much like that natural genius, you know, stretch a long goal and give yourself small milestones.
Amanda, can I just very quickly, before you go on, jump in on that comparison one? Lauren, we're in a fairly unique position in that we see the entirety of a photographer's work. So Amanda touched on it before, that when you go to someone's site, when you look at their advertising, they're showing you the best of the best, like the 1 in 1,000 shot that they managed to capture, the one that they spent 20 hours editing. Often that's not actually reflective of their standard output. And I'm talking incredibly big names within the Australian industry, that what you see at the front end is often not what you see at the back end. And that can help when you think about the comparison, because it's not always, what you're comparing yourself to is not the entirety of that photographer's output. In fact, it's a tiny fraction of it. Sorry, Amanda, I just wanted to...
No, I think that's a really good point. I think there was also about inspired by that and then feel terrible that I'm not there because of where you want to be. So one of the things there is to think about not just where you want to be and the gap, but it's also where you've been. So remember when you very first started learning, and pay attention to how much progress you've already made. And all you need to do to get to where you want to do, the only thing that you have to do is keep going. Okay, glad for that. Let's just pop back in, and I'm going to get to the next slide. Right. I am forever mucking around with this. Let's go back to present. Okay, so they were some tips on imposter syndrome, but there's more. And how do we overcome it? This is actually by identifying the beliefs that you have. Now, I'm going to tell you a few things about beliefs, and you may or may not believe me, but That's what we're here for, to talk about beliefs. Here's the thing. Humans are meaning-making machines. We see, hear, observe, or experience something, and we interpret what that something means. And if it doesn't make sense, we find a way for it to create sense. Our beliefs are informed by those things that we've seen and experienced in our lifetime at different points. It doesn't mean that we're actually correct. Often, we will interpret something as if we're mind readers. And we might be meaning-making machines, but we're sure as heck not mind readers. And whether you're consciously aware of them or not, you have beliefs about you as a person, as an artist, as a creative professional, as a business person. You have beliefs about yourself. Have you seen that post? I see it on Instagram quite a lot, and Pinterest and places like that, the creative process. It goes, this is awesome, this is tricky, this is shit, I am shit, this might be okay, this is awesome. Has anyone seen that one before? Whether you have or not, I've seen that, and it's pretty relatable. We go through that creative process, particularly if you're really wanting to get it right. But I say those steps don't need or deserve equal weight or time. And in fact, why spend any time at all in the I am shit? What if you value yourself and your art? Then your steps could be more about that joyous process. It's not about judging you on your work. And beliefs aren't facts. A belief is simply a thought that you have thought so often that you've decided it is true. That is all a belief is. It is not a fact. So it's always useful as you're identifying that you have these limiting beliefs impacting you. It's helpful to remember that and to think about, well, what is it that I'm telling myself about myself? And why am I choosing to believe that? And imposter syndrome is absolutely nothing to do with your art. And in fact, it's nothing to do with you as a person. For the soloist, the expert, the perfectionist, the superhero, the natural genius, any lack of success in art, career, output, or business can be incorrectly used by you to confirm your imposter syndrome. But actually, it's not related to your abilities. It's all to do with your perceptions. So it's a belief that you're choosing to continue to have. Now, it might sound harsh when I say we're choosing. That doesn't mean, it's come from somewhere. And so you need to unlearn it. We've all got habits that we need to unlearn. And often the things that happen with imposter syndrome are habits. We've just gotten into the way of thinking about things. So here are a few other things that you can do to improve your mindset to reduce this imposter syndrome. And that's about avoiding comparisons, as we've already talked about, accepting and appreciating your strengths, taking steps to build your self-confidence, using reframing. So what are the words that come into your head that are negative and limiting, and how can you flip them to be more positive and open? Adopting a growth mindset and having some positive coping mechanisms. Now, as creatives, it's also important to be able to detach your self-worth from any results that your work does or doesn't achieve to a degree. There's always going to be an attachment, but add some objective lenses into your practice by things like getting comfortable with asking for feedback, casting an objective eye over your art. The point that Dylan made before about, it's the one in, it might have been 1,000 shots. Be prepared to have 999 bad shots to get that one perfect shot. Have that objective eye that not everything has to be to the standard that you see from other people. And another thing that I find useful from a business perspective, to separate your self-worth from the actual outcome or performance of your business, is understanding some of the statistics, like conversion rates. I always find this really fascinating. Do you know website conversion rates? Dylan, you've probably talked about this topic at some point, or if exposed to this, in terms of how many visitors to a website before you make a sale.
Yeah, it's not something we've covered, but in these Zooms, but it is something I'd love to cover.
Yeah, and so it's something that, irrespective of the size of your list, irrespective of, and by that I mean, your mailing list and website traffic, common conversion is less than 3%. And so, and it's down in that sort of ones and twos, and that's considered the norm. Now, one of the things that happens that I see is we have these websites, we have these businesses, and we expect them to perform to really high levels. And when they don't, it reinforces all of the we're not good enough, rather than let's go and actually have a look at the traffic numbers in the website. Oh, there's been no sales because there's actually been no visitation to the website. What do I fix about that? Rather than there's been no sales because my work's no good. It's like there hasn't been sales because I haven't seen them. So it's just putting some objectivity lens into the practice. And the final one that I promised to share, which I absolutely will, is you're in the middle of an imposter syndrome attack. You're right there, you're having the thought. Now, the things that I've mentioned before, these are ongoing things that you want to really try and just integrate into your daily life. Journaling is actually also really helpful. Integrate. So that's, keep doing those things. But if you're right in it, here's what you do. Stop and recognize it. Go, oh, this sounds like, feels like imposter syndrome. Just take a moment to center yourself with some calming, deep breaths, and then challenge it mentally or out loud if you prefer. If you're actually on a bus or somewhere publicly, maybe just do it inside your head. But if you're in your own workspace, feel free to do it out loud and call it up. Hello, imposter syndrome. I see you. I'm not going to play. I know that I am worthy. I know that I'm good enough, or whatever words work for you. I actually have named my imposter syndrome. She's Beryl, and Beryl knows nothing about art, but she keeps coming and having a little bit of a chat from time to time. And so when she shows up, I just go, oh, hey, Beryl. And I don't have to play a part because it's not actually me and it's not actually real. So you just challenge it and then replace the thought with the next best thought you can have. Of course I can do this. I've done it before. There's no reason I can't. I've been successful many times. Remind yourself of something positive. And then what is the very next best action that you can take? So that next action might be sending that submission, emailing that potential buyer, confirming the price, making you work, whatever it is that's relevant. It can't be a science project. It's not like, oh, I'm going to create a new website. It's like, what's the thing that I can do in the next 30 minutes, in the next hour? Like, what's the thing I can do right this minute to help me move out and take that action? The more that you catch it and challenge it in the moment, the shorter the impact will be. And the clearest, simplest way to get out of an imposter syndrome attack is to simply move. Taking some action. So what these 5 steps do is it's like a pattern interrupter. You just go, oh, now that I've seen it and now that you know what it is, you go, I recognize it, pause, I'll do these few steps. And then you're in a different state. And so that's the smoothest way for getting through an attack and making it shorter and shorter. And the shorter they are, the less common they become. And so that was my how to get through imposter syndrome. I've got things all over the way. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, so here's what we covered, what it is, why it matters, 5 types, different strategies to limit, and we talked about beliefs and how to get through an imposter syndrome attack. And there's that quote that I mentioned before, comparison is the thief of joy. The thing is, it does take conscious effort. It's an awareness thing and paying attention. And I always love to share this as my thought about humans. We're messy, brilliant, vibrant, jumbled up and compelling and intriguing. And that is what makes you most interesting. It's not the perfection. It's all of the things that come with it. So that is it for what I wanted to share. And I just have a little offer here. So now that I've said all that, shall I do a stop, share, and see if anyone wants to share or ask a question or make any comments or thoughts? Yeah, Beryl's my imposter syndrome, and my inner critic is called Neville. Apologies to anyone who's a Beryl or a Neville, but they just seem like kind of words that are so not like Amanda. time to give mine some names and challenge them out. Yeah, I know it might sound like a kind of crazy thing, but I've seen this work and it works for me. So you're welcome, Lauren. You're welcome to take yourself off mute and off video and video if you would like to, for any final words. And I don't know, Dylan, have we got anything here in the comments that we haven't touched that I really should? Let me see.
No, I think we covered all the questions. I mean, one thing from our perspective, and I shared this at the last session with Amanda, is the issue of comparison has been an important transition for us as a business as well. That when we first set up, we were always looking at what other suppliers did and whether or not we matched up to it, or we were doing the right thing. But we've gained a lot more confidence and a lot more direction and a lot more drive by simply focusing on what we can do, what we achieve. And we'll often get comments that say, take a look at this, take a look at this, why aren't you doing that? And while we'll generally reply to it and acknowledge it, we just keep our head down. We don't compare ourselves to others. We don't feel that we have to be the same as any other company. And that's been incredible for our drive, our sort of progression. But also, like, I see so many, like, we see so many photographers at the start of their career who are paralyzed by that issue of comparison. They want to set up, but they can't get past that mental block of actually charging for the work, because they spend so much time looking at what else is in the marketplace and thinking, I'm not there yet, therefore I can't value myself.
Yeah, and that's the worst way to price. I see people putting things up on Facebook and say, what should I ask for this? And it's like, if that's where you're starting with your pricing model, you've got it all wrong. Really, you are all creative in whatever field that you're following, because you have that call to be creative, and it's a really strong desire, and this is where you belong. So judge yourself on yourself, where you're going and what you need to do next. Now, when I talk about imposter syndrome, if you've recognized any of this in you, I don't want you to take away and go, oh, I'm bad, I have imposter syndrome, I'm going to judge myself. What I'm sharing with you here is that this is enormously common for people with beliefs about themselves, and it's just about, how do I find the beliefs that are supportive for me? So there's nothing wrong if you've seen these things. It's, now that I have this information, what do I choose to do with it? And these things, they've taken a lifetime to come up for you, a lifetime of different beliefs that have caused these, incorrect assumptions at times. So don't expect it to be something that you fix overnight. It's something that you'll need to consciously work on until it becomes less conscious. Someone 10 years in started the transition, totally experiencing imposter syndrome with growing, changing. Yeah, that change does happen. Customer service, yeah. No, it's just Cassie talking about the support that she's had, Dylan, I believe. But yes, that transition, I talk with people who have been making art. For some of the clients who work with me in the Artist Business Lounge have been making work professionally for 30 and 40 years and are just now dealing with imposter syndrome because they didn't realize that was the problem. You guys need to do 15-second pep talk of the key points of all of this that we can play for ourselves before a shoot. Okay, we'll do that. We'll do something. One of the things I did just want to say before everybody leaves, as we mentioned, I do run a business called the Artist Business Lounge. I do individual coaching, group coaching. I have different programs. And because you're here, because you've registered for this session, I invite you to a complimentary, no selling, complimentary 30-minute call to discuss any aspect of your art business, including this is fine too. So you'll find me at all of the places on theartistbusinesslounge.com. It's a genuine offer. If you would like a 30-minute call, this is how you find me. So I hope that you've gotten something out of this. I hope that you found it useful to move you forward. And thank you all for giving me your time.
Thanks, Amanda. That was fantastic. Just before we wrap up, we've got 2 more sessions planned with Amanda.
Yep.
The next one is maybe more explicitly targeted at artists. So it's about creating a reproduction from an original work. You may know people who are interested in it as a topic, but the one after that is about sales funnels. And although we'll be approaching it from an artist's perspective, it will be incredibly relevant for photographers as well. So I'll put those links when I send out your copy of the recording for this.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks again. And hopefully we'll see some of you in future Zooms.
Terrific. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We've got lots of comments here, and I appreciate that this has been helpful, and I appreciate you sharing. And I'm going to say something, which is all of the things that you feel, all of the doubts that you feel are things that other people feel, are doubts. They are so completely normal. So don't let it stop you. Just move on past as best you can. And if you need any help, reach out. As I said, there's a 30-minute complimentary call available. So don't be shy. And hopefully we'll see you in the next sessions.
Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.